Hi everyone, really quick one here. Just going to look over data types really quickly. So this will be really useful in the next video, which will be looking at casting. So we've already mentioned what a string is. So here you can see in line 4 an example of a string, and in line 3 just gives you a quick definition of what a string actually is. So it is quite simply a sequence of characters. Now it could be literally anything inside these two quotation marks, whatever characters you want to put in there, random characters on a keyboard. It could be numbers, it could be letters, it could be anything, as long as it's inside those two quotation marks, it will output it as a string. So it's not strictly as a word, because you can put numbers in it, but generally speaking, it is any sort of sequence of characters. Our next data type is integers. So integers, just like you would learn in maths, are just whole numbers. So any whole number that does not have a decimal point is considered an integer. And you can output integers without those quotation marks that you need for a string, but you do still need to put them inside a bracket if you're outputting them as your own. You can also assign them to variables, which I'll show you in a minute, which will just based on our last video that we looked at. Next, we have a float. Another name for a float is a decimal number. So you would learn about it in school as a decimal number in maths. However, in computer science, we refer to it as a float. And it's again, it's pretty self-explanatory, but again, it will need to have a decimal point in between it for it to be considered a float. And the last one that we won't look at for a little while, is called Boolean. Now, Boolean really is just true or false. The only thing is, it needs to have a capital letter at the beginning of true or false. So if you were to print true or print false, you would need a capital letter at the beginning. And notice that the syntax coloring does show us that Python understands what that is. So if I just output this, it's just going to output what I've said for its output, really. So our string, hello, our integer is 8, our float is 8.2. And then our Boolean values are true and false, and they're used more so later on for when you want to check and set the conditions for certain things, which will make a bit more sense once we've gone through selection. So let's just say string equals anything we want, hello, and then we can remember we can output a variable. So I can output a variable here, and I've forgotten to put a quotation mark there. So we can output the variable. So line 5 will be outputting whatever this variable is here. So it doesn't have to be a string, it could be an integer. But remember, that's not really good programming practice because it's going to get a little bit confusing. We could have here an integer equals 9, and we're going to print the variable integer, and it works in exactly the same way as it would do just outputting them on their own. But remember, obviously variables get very useful because we're going to use them later on to store things longer term and then reuse